Hank Fahnert is a 16-year veteran. Hold on, let me do the intro. Holy cow. I would say he deserves that, but let me tell you about Frank first. Okay. Hank Fahnert, and I'm going to have to read this because I do not have memorized from 2019. Hank Fahnert is a 16-year veteran police officer in Texas who currently serves as a training coordinator for the Shorts Police Department. Hank is a certified instructor in numerous fields and a member of the department's honor guard and drone team. That's kind of impressive. You couldn't figure out the computer earlier, but you can fly a drone? Okay. Hank is an instructor for Alert, where he teaches active shooter response. Prior to working at Shorts Police Department, Hank served at the Lavernia Police Department. While at Lavernia Police Department, Hank was one of the first responding officers at Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church massacre, where again, the killer took the innocent lives of 26 individuals, hurting 20 others on that sad day, November 5th, 2017. Hank is a recipient of numerous awards and commendations from his actions on the day of that horrific incident. Here today to discuss lessons learned and educate us on that grim day at Sutherland Springs. And I do want to mention, he's only have an hour here to present. If you're that person that wants to ask that question but is hesitant, you might hurt his feelings, pop that hand up and ask the question, because everyone here wants to know. So this is kind of a Q&A thing too. During his presentation, we're not going to have Q&A afterwards. We'll do the demo. So during that presentation, feel free to interrupt him. Ask those questions. Any questions are acceptable. Please welcome Hank Fahnert.
Thank y'all very much, and thank y'all very much for having me. Thank you, Nate, and I appreciate you bringing me here, and thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Colonel Grossman, for having this amazing seminar here. This is sort of stuff that we should be having, and the critical incident that I responded to, I feel had a lot of good after actions, and I think that this is possibly one of them, that we all get together and we all think about church safety, we think about church security. And so Nate talked about me. I'm Hank Fahnert. I work for Shorts Police Department. I'm the training coordinator over there now. Been in law enforcement for 16 years. Who here has been in law enforcement in the past? So we've got a lot of people with law enforcement experience. And so hopefully you all kind of understand, I'm a cop. I'm not a speaker. I'm a cop. I'm also, just a normal dude. Thank you so much, sir. So I see this amazing facility that we're in today in this beautiful church. That's the church that got shut up that day. It was a very, very small building. The last time I went there, it's actually since been torn down. Last time I went there was the day before it got torn down. The last day the public could go in there and view it. And it was really important for me to go back there. And like every time I talk about this stuff and every time I go and, do something like that, I'm kind of tearing the scab off and bleeding a little bit, but it's important to bleed because I feel like the things that I saw that day and the things I did that day are all important lessons that I hope y'all all can benefit from. So if anybody here has a question, you're not going to offend me. I want to help y'all out, and I want to answer as many questions as possible. All right? So talking about Lavernia and Wilson County. So prior to my time at Shorts Police Department, I worked for Lavernia Police Department. I was there for 12 years. Lavernia is a very small city. It has a population of about 1,249 people. Not a very big place at all. It's 1.8 square miles, and it's 7 miles away from Sutherland Springs. There's 8 churches inside the Lavernia city limits, and there is a Lavernia ISD that serves 3,300 students. Greater area population is about 42,000. The greater area population is pretty big, but Lavernia itself is pretty small. And that's a big thing, is that's a lot of churches in a small area. And so if anybody here is still current law enforcement, I'd really encourage you to think about that. Think about, pop in there on a Sunday. I mean, we're all out on patrol. We're all doing our thing. Pop in there, talk to people. Let them know that you're there. It's important. So I was assigned to daylight patrol that day. It was a solo patrol. I was the only officer working in the city that day. Who here in law enforcement has ever done that, where you're the only, one riot, one ranger kind of thing? It's a little sketchy sometimes, especially in situations like this. Wilson County Sheriff's Department was my closest backup. There was probably about 5 deputies throughout the county that day. 6 is what it says, I'm sorry. and one of them being on FTO. Texas Highway Patrol was also there, as well as Texas Parks and Wildlife Game Wardens. So this is how it started, and I'll tell you beforehand. So we found out later that the shooter, the intended target was his mother-in-law. His mother-in-law attended the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. She also attended the First Baptist Church of Lavernia. She kind of went back and forth between the two of them. I later found out that the shooter did a surveillance operation before he went to Sutherland Springs in Lavernia. And I like to think that me patrolling that day and seeing a law enforcement presence in the city showed that it wasn't a soft target. He drove to First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, and the way he started off is he fired 450 rounds from the outside of the church into the church. So he parked there, he got outside the church, and we saw that it was just a little wood building, nothing that would be able to stop a .556 round. And so he fired 450 rounds working from the outside of the church before he even made it inside. At 11:17, the first 911 calls came in, and officers were dispatched. So he then entered the church, and he began executing parishioners. Point blank, very, very brutal stuff. They had already been weakened by the initial assault from shooting outside the church before he made entry. And so that's something that's important to think about. And so anybody here on a church security team? Everybody. How many people are sitting in the parking lot? I think that's an important part of it. When my dad's he's on the church security team at our church in Lavernia, and after this he said, hey, what should I do? How should I better improve my abilities to be a part of this church security team? I said, you don't need to be inside the church. You need to be outside the church with a rifle, because you're going to be scanning, you're going to have a radio, and you're going to be scanning and trying to get to the bad guy before he gets in there. Because in this situation, that would have been the best solution, is somebody out in a vehicle with a rifle watching the doors. Keep an eye on it. So hearing the gunshots, Stephen Williford, who's become a really good friend of mine, he grabbed his rifle. He didn't have any loaded magazines, but he grabbed an AR-15 rifle, and he started loading magazines. He started loading as many rounds as he could get into the gun as possible. He wasn't wearing any shoes, and he was just there on Sunday, just hanging out at his house. Heard that shooting, grabbed his rifle, started loading rounds. His daughter told him, said, hey, the church is getting shot up. He said, here, load some magazines for me. He was doing that so that she would do something instead of actually going out there. He walked across the street, no shoes on, and he saw the shooter there walking inside the church. He addressed him by saying, hey, good thing to say. And they then got into a two-way gunfight. He put successful hits on the bad guy. The bad guy at this time, he had already dropped his rifle, and so he was able to put successful hits on the bad guy, and it caused him to leave the scene. He got in his vehicle and he left. At this point, Stephen flagged down somebody that was driving past and said, and this is another thing, Texas is awesome. If I see somebody out there flagging somebody down with a rifle, what would y'all do in Illinois? I got a question. Yeah, they don't have any rifles, exactly. And so Stephen flags down Johnny Langendorf. He's in his Dodge pickup, and he says, hey, that guy just shot up the church. We need to go handle this. And so he says, come on, let's go. They then get into a high-speed pursuit. They go, it's about 11 miles down FM 539 that they proceeded. And they're going at speeds of 95 miles an hour. They're trying to catch this guy because he's doing terrible stuff. It was shortly before that when the call dropped. I heard the call dispatched. And the first thing that I do, and the first thing I encourage everybody in law enforcement to do, is before you respond to something like this, be prepared for the gunfight before you get there. What I mean by that is get your plate carrier on, because you're going to be dealing with somebody with a rifle. Get your helmet on if you got one. Get your long gun. Get it ready. Because you need to know that when you get there, you're probably going to receive fire. You're probably going to get into a gunfight as soon as you get there. I'm putting my kit on, and my sergeant drives into the parking lot. He was off that day. He was in basketball shorts. He was coming to get his sunglasses from his patrol car. He left them in there. He saw me getting all my fun stuff on, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Somebody's shooting up the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to stop him." And he said, "I live on the way. Pick me up from my house." And so he lived on the way there, and he grabbed his rifle, he grabbed his armor, and a go bag, and hopped in my Tahoe, and we went as fast as we could to the church shooting. This is why it's really important to relay that information on the radio, because not everybody there that's a good guy is going to be wearing good guy things. He's wearing basketball shorts. I mean, it's his day off. I'd be wearing basketball shorts too. But you got to put that stuff on the radio so we don't have any blue on blue stuff going on. While en route, we're getting a lot of conflicting information. Of course, we're getting the multiple shooters. Every single active shooter, you're going to hear that, hey, there's multiple shooters, because the people, they're getting a mass amount of information. They're overloaded, and so they don't know exactly what's going on. They're also saying that he's still there. There's some people that are saying that he's left the location already, and so we're getting conflicting information from both parties. So we had to make a decision right then and there. We're going to go to the church. If he's at the church, we're going to address the threat there, and then we're going to handle business. And so we went straight to the church instead of going down the potential exit route that he would have gone. So this is talking about the pursuit. So Johnny Langendorf and Stephen Williford, they pursued the shooter, and they wrecked out at a farm to market road, 539, in Hartfield Road, which is about 11 miles away. The shooter wrecked out in a field. He was stopped by a barbed wire fence, and so Stephen got out of the truck with his rifle. I think he had 1 or 2 rounds left, and he was holding gun on there. So upon arrival to the church, my sergeant and I made contact with the Wilson County Sheriff's deputy that had gotten there at the same time we did. Just a couple seconds later, Texas Parks and Wildlife Game Warden arrived, and so we immediately formed a 4-man contact team. We're very lucky that we had 4 people, just by happenstance. That never happens, but we were very lucky that's how it went. We saw the rear door open on the church. If you can take a look at it, you've got Highway 87, and then you've got 539. It's going to be back on that corner right there. Right where that cross is the front door. On the other side is the back door. And so we saw the rear door ajar, and so we made our approach. The Wilson County Sheriff's Deputy Mike Marr, a good friend of mine, he opened the door, and we made entry into the back library room of the church. One thing about this church, and I didn't really realize it that day, and I had to actually go back there to kind of understand it, because you're getting all this information also, just like the callers, and you're putting that puzzle piece together for yourself. And when I went before they tore it down, the ceilings are about 7 feet high. They're super short, and so it makes a lot more sense when I say what I say right now. The first thing that hit me as soon as I walk in is the massive smell of gunpowder and blood in the room. And so I'm first person in. I clear that small room, and then I see an open door to the worship area. I do a threshold evaluation on that door. First thing I see is a lady in a green dress slumped behind the pulpit, right here at the front. And so I continue to do my threshold evaluation. I make entry into the room. As I'm making entry, the first thing I do is I tell everybody, hey, show me your hands. I need to see your hands. I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One of the reasons is I want to make sure that there's not a threat. We think the guy's still in there at that point. That's why we made entry, is because we thought the bad guy was still in there. We got to do work. We got to kill that dude. And first of all, who here wants to kill anybody? Does anybody want to kill anybody? No? I disagree. If somebody's doing this evil to a church, do you want to kill that person? Yes. Then y'all all want to kill somebody. And that's okay. That's y'all's job to put that evil on that evildoer. So understand that and be okay with that. And so as I'm clearing the church, I'm trying to get as many hands, one thing I can see is everybody is piled up on the side of the church. On each side, they're piled up. and they're just trying to get away from the bullets. They're trying to get to some level of safety. As we continue to clear, we get to the church. We're inside the church, and we determine that it's clear the shooter's not in there. And so we immediately transition into a medical role, because that's what they teach. They teach stop the killing, stop the dying. So the first person I contacted was a 15-year-old female. She'd been shot twice, once through the torso with a 5.56 and once through the leg with a 5.56. You got to think about what's your priority of work. What's the thing that I can fix, that I need to fix first? The thing I fixed first was the tourniquet on the leg. Carry a lot of tourniquets with you, because these things go by quick. Carry a lot of tourniquets with you. Yeah, carry a lot of tourniquets with you. Not just for everybody else, but for yourself. How many limbs do you have on you? 4. How many tourniquets should you carry? At least that. That's how many you might need. In your go bag that you carry, you probably need to have about 10 of them. It's an important thing, and they go by quicker than you think. So this female that had been shot twice, I put a tourniquet on her leg, on her left leg, and then I put a halo chest seal on her torso. She had an entry and an exit wound, and so I slapped that chest seal on there. And I looked in her eyes, and I'll never forget this. I told her, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And a few minutes later, I ended up scooping her up, handing her to the first medical person there, which was the assistant fire chief for Lavernia. He came there, handed her off. He got her to medical. Second person I went to was Zach Poston. He got shot. Yes, sir. Yes, it was. It was ball ammo. It was 55 grain ball ammo. Yeah, and so that's one big part about it is, and I take a lot of solace in this fact that as soon as we made entry into the church, nobody else died. All of our medical adjuncts that we used at that point, everything that we did, made for a successful outcome for everybody that was still alive in the church at that time. Yeah, thank God. And so, 5.56 out of a 16-inch barreled rifle, which he was shooting a Ruger AR 5.56. It does wicked things when it tumbles. I mean, it gets unstable and it does bad stuff. I don't know how much more lethal if he would have had like law enforcement ammunition, but it was pretty bad enough already. And specifically, like thinking about Zach Poston, the second person that I went to, he got shot 7 times, and I put a tourniquet on his left arm because he had a near traumatic amputation of that left arm, and that's the sort of stuff that even ball 5.56 does. It's a wicked round when it starts tumbling. It does bad stuff. And so, like I said, I went to Zach and I put a tourniquet on his arm. He got shot a whole bunch. We ended up getting him out of there also. I went up to a girl that got shot in the leg, became a really good friend of mine, Morgan Workman, and I saw she was bleeding from the leg. And can I say badass in a church? Yeah, because she's a badass. Yeah, I went up to her and I said, hey, you got shot. Let me put a tourniquet on you. And she said, I'm good. Give it to somebody else. So I absolutely commend that sort of bravery and just an amazing person, and I always talk about her. Everybody's doing medical stuff. One of the, David Colbath, another person who's become a friend of mine since this, he was shot 5 or 7 times. He was shot 8 times. 8 times. David got shot 8 times, and he was bleeding like a sieve from his left arm. Rob Fretz, the game warden, he went over to David, and he put a tourniquet on his left arm. And he said it was like turning off a faucet when he tightened it. And so that's the great impact that these tools have, is they're able to so successfully stop bleeding. It's like turning off a faucet. He would have died really soon if we would not have had that awesome piece of medical equipment with us. My Sergeant Donald Kyle, he also put medical stuff on. Wilson County Sheriff's Office, they did not issue any medical equipment to their deputies. The only thing they issued was boo-boo kits, Band-Aids, alcohol wipes, that sort of stuff. They didn't have plate carriers there. Very, very, very unprepared. Deputy Marr, he assisted in casualty care, but you don't got what you don't got. And so if your agency doesn't supply you with this stuff, I know times are tight, and I know, everybody has things they got to buy. Spend that little bit of extra money on yourself. Buy the medical kit that you need, because it might save your life and it might save the lives of the people that you love. So, I'm doing all the medical stuff. One thing I want to add to this is get a good sling on your rifle, something that's you're gonna be able to get up tight to your body. Because as I'm doing medical stuff on this person, on these people, my rifle was flopping all in front of me. And so I took it off and I handed it to Deputy Marr. I said, "Hey, can you hold on to this for me?" He said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so it got passed around, went from one place to another. And then the radio call went out and said, "Hey, we got a deputy out at the crash scene where the shooter's at. We need more cops. We got one deputy out there." By one deputy, I actually mean two, because this deputy was training a recruit on her third day in law enforcement. So every single person that I train now, I'm really involved in the integration process of our new applicants. Every single person I say, you never know what you're going to get, even on your first day, even on your third day. Be prepared for everything. Be sharp. She was on her third day. So they were holding guns on this guy. They needed more cops out there. I was pissed. I wanted to go get my pound of flesh. I wanted to get some payback. And so I said, I'm going to go to that scene. There was medical personnel already arriving, doing their thing, and I've run out of my medical equipment that I carried on me, and so it's time to go do work. And so I headed out there, drove there as fast as I could, without my rifle, because I handed it off and I lost it. So don't do that. But I'm resourceful. I tell you, I'm resourceful. As soon as I got to the crash site, I went and I stole a deputy's rifle. So I talk about this a lot, and this is one of my favorite parts of the whole story. The deputy that had first got to the crash scene where Stephen Williford was holding a gun on the shooter, who I will not name, he was holding a gun on him, and he said, "Hey, show me your hands." So Stephen puts the gun down, puts his hands up, and he said, "Not you." Another thing, only in Texas, that you would get. Would you do that in Illinois? Just asking. And so I get out there, and we've got the vehicle surrounded on both sides. We've got Guadalupe County Sheriff's deputies, which is the adjoining county, on one side, and this pursuit actually led into Guadalupe County. Then on this side, we have all the Wilson County, and we have Texas DPS intermingled throughout. And we see that the vehicle is crashed out in a field with a bunch of hay bales around. And so we're forming a plan. One of the Wilson County Sheriff's deputies that was out there, Manny Perez, he says, "Hey, I just got a drone for my birthday." And I said, "Let's put that dude up." And so we were able to successfully put that little DJI Mavic up in the air. We flew it into the window, and we got actionable intelligence that we were able to see that the shooter was slumped over. And so one thing I will say to that, use your technology, use your resources. I'm not a video game guy. Most other drone guys are video game guys, but that made me a drone guy that day. And that's why I'm doing drone stuff now, and I think that it's a really important tool that we have in law enforcement, and we need to start using it more and doing that. By using that information, we formed a contact team, and we made our approach of the shooter, and determined him to be deceased. At that point, we backed off, held perimeter, and I went up to the church to hold perimeter up there. These are the victims. 26 amazing people. So as I'm running perimeter up there, third row down, second picture on the right, on the left, going to the right. That is a 15-year-old girl that I had seen the 15-year-old girl in there, and I told her, I said, "You are going to be okay." And I saw that she was wearing blue jeans, black Converse shoes. And I see blue jeans and black Converse shoes sitting out from a yellow tarp. And I beat myself up really hard that I lied to that girl. And I later found out that she had lived. But it's tough stuff. We see kids, we see babies. It's difficult. John Holcomb, who lived through this, he lost 9 members of his family that day. And it's difficult stuff. So 20 people were injured in the shooting who survived. Like I said, once we arrived at the church, the dying stopped. Yeah.
Have you personally sought out mental health counseling and desensitization therapy for what you saw that day?
So yeah, I actually did speak to some therapists and stuff like this about this, and it was suggested to like potentially try EMDR. It never got to that point, but from what I understand, EMDR is extremely effective in something like this. And I would encourage anybody that goes through something like that to reach out to their peer support, to reach out to a therapist and look at EMDR. Yeah. Yeah, so EMDR, first time I heard about it, it sounded like pseudoscience, but it absolutely works. It's amazing stuff. It does rapid eye motions, and you follow like a stimulus, typically a light, and it's amazing stuff. Since this, over at Schertz Police Department, I'm part of the peer support team, and that's one thing we really advocate for is if you get into a situation like this, seek out EMDR, and it really helps in the healing process. Yes, sir. Yeah, and Colonel Grossman's going to address EMDR tomorrow, correct? Yeah, amazing stuff, and I wish I could be there to hear all about that. So, yeah, please do. I'd like to see it. Had a weapon on him? No, nobody in the church had a weapon on him. And you'd think in Texas, you'd think they would, right? But this kind of was the reason why we moved towards that model of having church security teams and having people armed protecting the flock. And so, you know, talking to Morgan, she's like a black belt in some martial arts discipline, absolute awesome person. She said that she was close enough where she could have tackled the guy potentially, but he's a bigger guy, and so she's a smaller girl, and so don't know how that would have worked. In that situation, something's better than nothing. If you can attack somebody like that, attack them with your bare hands. But you know, I think to that, prior to this, that was kind of like a lot of preachers didn't want guns in their church. That was a real thing. Yeah, please, Jimmy.
The pastor was in Oklahoma City at a black gunpowder training, and the pastor always carried a gun. He was a gun fanatic, Frank Pomeroy, Marine. The other guy that always carried a gun was not at church yet. He was late running an errand for a Christian motorcycle group. That's what happened. Now, big training.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that actually.
The guy that usually carried a gun. And
Yeah.
it's in that video that I sent you. I sent you all a 5-minute video. Watch these videos. It's only 5 minutes. Frank will tell you where the other guy was.
Yes, sir.
What was the time frame from like when the first 911 call came in, and like any idea of like how effective was the fire from the outside, or was most of the damage done when he went inside?
From what? So I don't have that specific information, but I think that the fire from the outside was extremely effective. Seeing the round holes through the walls and stuff. I mean, those are little masonite boards on a wood structure. It's not stopping anything. It's going straight through. And so I really think it's important to have a masonry construction on your worship halls, for no other reason than this. And so, yeah, it was extremely effective. And I think that was the reason why it drove them to the sides of the church itself, to try to avoid that.
So on that, was he shooting from like the front door in then, or was he like?
He was going around. He was going around all through the outside. Yeah, there were dozens of magazines strewn throughout the worship yard. Yes, sir. No. So he was actually out of New Braunfels, and to my knowledge, he had dealings with military police, so Air Force Security Forces had arrested him prior for assault family violence, for like a family violence offense. And so he had been through the military justice system, but I don't think he had been through the like Texas criminal justice system. And that was a big thing, is the Air Force didn't share information with you know the place that does the background checks, and the NICS, to do that. And so they actually won a lawsuit about that. Yes, sir.
Once patients were treated, how did you guys organize handoff EMS? Set up a type of collection point?
It was chaos, frankly. And I think that that's one of the amazing models that Alert and other active shooter places are going to, is maintaining a casualty collection point so that you don't have this chaos. But it's a small town. You know, we know everybody that comes into that church. We know everybody that's doing that. And so it wasn't organized. The medical personnel, as soon as we said it was you know, warm and not hot, we had them come in there, and they brought them out. Yes, sir.
One is the type of tourniquet. There are lots of different varieties that emphasize that get a good quality tourniquet
Yeah.
break on you,
Yeah.
cause problems. The second is there are a lot of teams that are in communities called CERTs, Civilian Emergency Response Teams,
Yes.
and those will help in the organization of medical treatment and passing it off to when the ambulance arrives.
You bet. Yeah. So speaking to the type of tourniquets I used, this was the equipment that I was using that day. I had North American Rescue CAT Gen 7 tourniquets is what I used that day. That, along with the Soft T Wide, are really the gold standard for trauma care. What I can say is, don't buy your tourniquets on Amazon. Whatever you do, don't buy your tourniquet, because you're going to get a knockoff tourniquet that's not going to be effective, going to potentially break that day. So when you buy your tourniquet, I'd say buy it directly from North American Rescue so that you ensure that you're getting the correct thing. You might get a 2-pack for $15 on Amazon, but I'd rather you spend twice as much to get one tourniquet that actually works. And so I think that's very important. CERT teams. I think CERT teams are awesome. That's what you're talking about, is the is community-based citizen teams. I think that's an amazing thing. In a small rural community, that's not something that we had access to that day, but bigger communities definitely have that, and draw on that if you have time. These are dynamic situations, and so things move fast, and you're just trying to get a handle on it. But if you have enough time to marshal your resources and get everything to, you know, like an exchange point and everything like that, so you can coordinate getting it in, have it staged, that would be awesome. Yes, sir.
One more point is about ham radio. In an incident like the Boston bombing, all cell phone towers were down. That may happen with similar circumstances of small towns and small towers, small number of towers.
Yeah.
So it would be good to have an alternate method of communication.
Yeah, comms are always difficult. We had difficulty with comms that day. It was tough getting the information out over the radio, as with the majority of these situations. And I think that that's why it's so important to designate somebody immediately who's in command. Say, hey, you are in command at this time. And so they can kind of run that stuff. They can marshal the resources. They can do the talking over the radio, and everything goes through that person. And so I think it's important to do that. Yeah, that day, the equipment that I was using was I had a rifle, of course. I had a SBR with a suppressor on it. I had my plate carrier. I was the only person there that had a plate carrier, something that could actually stop the rounds that the shooter was firing. I had a helmet. I had tourniquet chest seals. I had a full IFAC on my kit. And I can't explain how important that is to you to have an individual first aid kit that is combat grade, something that you could take into combat and you know that what you'd have would be sufficient. And then we used a drone. We used a personally owned drone that day. The Texas Rangers subsequently tried to take that drone. They were told no. That was his birthday present. Yes, sir. Who's got a question over here? Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank the Academy. In the aftermath and the chaos and keeping families back, I know crime scene tape. I work in an area remote enough, if too many people call 911 at once, it crashes it, as in 12.
Yeah.
And so that's I guess my question. How you got assigned people to keep people out, saying that's my cousin, uncle's brother inside?
Yeah, at first, before we had an established perimeter, and we were just trying to, cops on scene, trying to do medical, we had a few people from the community that were across the street trying to help. And so that stuff's going to happen. It wasn't till later that we established our perimeter. Every vehicle in there was locked down. People had to wait a few days to get their car if it was parked there. And so that's just a reality of the situation. And so reunification is important. It's important to have a reunification point. And so I can't say how important that is, actually.
Hey, Hank, I know you still got 20 minutes, so that's fine. I'm going to try to walk around with some questions as you continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more for this lady, but I had one real fast for you, maybe from others. Obviously, small community, small church, confined area, small ceilings.
Yes.
Everyone's packed in there. 26 perished, 20 injured. Did anyone flee, and how many were in there total?
Yeah, we actually had one person that was one or two that self-evacuated. They went to a hospital by themselves. They had a pretty nasty gunshot wound, and so they went to Floresville, which was about a 25-minute drive, to go to the hospital themselves. And so,
So you believe a lot of it maybe came from we don't know what we don't know, and like the Fort Lauderdale airport incident, we weren't trained. It wasn't our subconscious. People laid on the ground there, small church, maybe no training on what to do. We don't know what to do, and we froze, deer in the headlights, and laid on the ground, perhaps? Yeah. Or we're all speculating, but could that be a root cause of why no one left, maybe? Or we don't know.
I think it's one of those things where you're just paralyzed with fear in that situation. I mean, these people, they weren't expecting that. Yeah. And so the body can't go to where the mind hasn't already gone. And so if you're not planning for that, you're going to get hit in the face. And so.
Question for this lady.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. On Tuesday, I attended the webinar from the Secret Service, the NTEC, it was a deep dive on the perpetrator. The one thing that I was wondering, though, that I think is so important for our churches, did anybody know all of the threats that he had made to the mother-in-law and the wife and the whole family? He had made hundreds of threats, but was the church at all aware of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that question. I know that they were concerned about him. I know that, like, the church, he had been at, like, the Halloween thing just a few weeks prior.
5 days
And
earlier.
so, 5 minutes?
5 days earlier.
5 days earlier, yeah, he was at the Halloween thing. So I'm not sure if he was on their radar as somebody that was a threat. I kind of lean to think not, but yeah. And so I wish I had more information on that. Yes.
Did the young lady law enforcement trainee, did she stay in law enforcement?
So yeah. So one of the statistics that is prevalent is about 50% of people that go through something like this, they're out of the career field in 5 years. And I think that that's a huge, huge negative thing. And so she stayed in law enforcement for probably about 5 years later, and then she did something that ended up getting her fired. And so unfortunate end of that career story. Any other questions? Yes. I tell you, I carry a lot more tourniquets. That's probably the biggest thing. Is one thing that I've personally done is I've gotten really into grant writing, because I worked at a small police department up until 2 years ago when I moved to Shirts. I worked at a very small police department. We don't have budget. We don't have all the good stuff that we might need in those situations. You got to beg, borrow, and steal to get that money. And so I got personally into grant writing so that I could get my department the equipment we needed. I secured us all plate carriers, helmets, ballistic shields, everything like that, because I wanted everybody to be prepared for their worst day. And so that's the stuff that I've done since then. Yes?
Thank you so much for sharing all this. That drive that you made after you picked up your sergeant, that was probably a long time period, it seemed like. Were there God moments for you in that, approaching there, like, were you shouting out, what kind of thoughts were going through as you were approaching the church? And were you also hoping that there was a citizen there, another guy there, like Stephen Wilford was?
Yeah.
Did that thought run through your mind there too? It's like you knew what your situation was with officers in the area, and you probably knew you needed help.
Our plan was pretty simple that day, and the stuff that we were having that conversation while we were driving over there was, we said, we get there, he's there, we're going to kill him. It's that simple. We're going to kill him, transition to a medical role. We're driving as fast as we can. We're trying to focus on that. And my sergeant, he was cussing at the other drivers that weren't getting out of our way. It was that sort of situation. So there weren't a lot of Christian words being spoken inside that vehicle. But I think one of the biggest things, and I've battled a lot with this, and Stephen Williford actually, we had a conversation about this. I mean, my whole career, I've trained for the gunfight. You want to get out there, you want to be the gunfighter, you want to do, gunfighter stuff and kill the bad guy. And, I did all the ancillary things, like I trained in medical because that's important too, right? And so, and I trained how to do this and that. But I think the reason Stephen was there is not just to stop the threat, but also to drive him away. Because by doing that, I think God put him there to do that. By doing that, he allowed it to be a warm zone where we could actually do medical in a safe space. And so I think that if the shooter would have been there and we would have, shot him and killed him, done gunfighter stuff, we wouldn't have been effective in doing the medical stuff that we were sent there by God to do. And so I think you got to understand, even though you don't know what your role is going to be that day, your role might be to hold a clipboard and have everybody, sign the crime scene log. Your role might be to, tie a tourniquet. Your role might be to get in a gunfight. Be flexible and understand that that's God's plan, whatever you have to do that day. Any other questions? Yes.
Some of the guys from my church here carry the guns, and we're happy for that. But my husband, most of all, is in the front a lot with the gun. So what you said earlier, if a gentleman gets out of a car and he has a gun and a rifle and it's obvious that he's coming in, if my husband shoots him first, will he be arrested?
Yeah, we've got somebody from U.S. Law Shield that's going to actually discuss a lot about that. But you got to understand the situation, and I think that he's going to really belay a lot of people's things. And I would say, even more important is to have a rifle in the parking lot outside watching the door. Yes?
So are the national averages for these events still 3 minutes duration and 5 minutes response time? I got one more.
Yeah, I'm not sure if those are the same or if those have changed. Yeah, I don't know what the
I'll take that one,
time.
Hank. So they've improved greatly. Again, a lot of it is dependent on, are you rural, are you metro? And again, it's not the response time that's the problem, it's the notification time. So again, the average response time to school massacres used to be about 20 minutes. That's not the response time. Cops are going to get there, as we know, 2, 3, 4 minutes. It's the notification time. Remember, Sandy Hook took place. Phone call came in and went to the adjacent agency. It rang 126 seconds before someone picked it up. Then they had to gather the information and dispatch the officers. So theoretically at Sandy Hook, officers got there very, very quickly, but no one knew about it for over 2 minutes. So there you put so you got to factor in that notification time as well.
That's right. And Nate, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. Nate has innovated a system where it goes straight from in a school, the teacher's phone to the cop's phone, that fast. And the teachers, the cops, and the off-duty cop is there. We don't care who's there. The reserve guy that lives next door, we're going to get them all there. Nate's innovated an amazing system to get the people there right stinking now. And like you said, there's this huge problem in the process of some notification and some response. So I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. There is a tool available. It's just an amazing low-hanging piece of fruit, and Nate pioneered that, and certainly he knows that data, and we know the answer.
Thank you so much, everybody. And so what I can say about response time is that trying to remember the times that I know real quick is the first call went out at 11:17. I remember writing first tourniquet time on a tourniquet for Haley McNulty. It was 11:33. So it took me 16 minutes to get there and put the first tourniquet on. Is the only information that I have on that. Yes.
All right. Lastly, this gal over here mentioned threats that had been made to the church potentially. Do we have any pastors in the room? All right. I would like to encourage you, because one of the things that I ran into at my local church was that the pastor knew of threats, but they did not make our team aware of them. So please, if you are a pastor, make sure you make your team aware of it. And if you are a team leader, please talk to your pastor and make sure they know they need to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And pointing out, I'm looking for someone else with a question. Pointing out what you mentioned, by no means have I been through something like you have, Hank. Thanks for mentioning your story and shedding light on that. But it keeps on saying what you say, what Colonel Grossman says. The training, the tourniquets, these churches should buy a $100, go bag and put it somewhere, just like you have a $5,000 AED everywhere, but it's probably mandated. Just put it there. We're all speculating, but of the 26 that perished, the 20 that are injured, how many more, if you didn't take great action, would have ended up dying that day if you didn't apply a 5-cent tourniquet on them? It's all speculation, but kudos to you for what you and your team did. Question here for sir.
Not a question. Our pastor's really good at allowing us to know if there's been a threat to the church or somebody that may come into the church that cause problems. When we become aware of it, one of our security team will sit close to that individual just in case something did happen. And if any mental patient, somebody with mental issues that comes in our church we don't know, we take them aside now. We don't let them go in the congregation.
Yeah, and I think that's really good practice right there. And so I just want to briefly cover after action. So immediately after the shooting, I had scheduled a 4-day class in North Texas. I'm in South Central Texas, and so I had a 4-day class scheduled in North Texas. I went to that, and so I isolated myself for 4 days, and that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And so what I can say is, speaking to y'all's point earlier about seeking help and talking to somebody, make that a point. Yeah, you got to talk to somebody as soon as you can. One of the most important things was to get the communication going between the other people that were there, whether that be law enforcement, talking to the civilian Good Samaritan that shot the shooter, talking to the parishioners, establish that relationship. Nobody's strong enough to handle this alone, and we're all putting a puzzle together because we only know one perspective of what that happened at that time. And so talk to everybody and try to get together. And so I just want to close out. Out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters. We're lucky to have them, for they make the battle. But for the one warrior, he will bring others back. And so I want y'all all to think about that, and I want y'all all to put it on yourself to be that one warrior, and so that y'all can bring everybody else back, and y'all can protect the flock to your best of y'all's ability. All right? Train now. Be ready for the day to come, because it can happen in my small community. It can happen in yours. Everybody always said, except me, said it's never going to happen here. Mount Vernon, what's the population here? 14,000, right? It's a very, very small community. It can't happen here, right? It absolutely can. You need to train like it will. Be ready for it. Equip yourself, train yourself, prepare your mind for things that you may have to do. Like I said, the body can't go where the mind hasn't already gone. So be ready for that. Be the one. All right, any additional questions? We've got a couple seconds left.
Here you go, sir.
Since we'd be part of the team, but the law enforcement is on the way, is there a vehicle
whereby we can have already set up a communication between the officers responding and the team that's been responding?
Well, that all depends on what level of communications your team has. I mean, none of our church security teams are on the same radio freaks as our police department, and so I think that's a difficult thing to have. And so if you can establish that, work with your local law enforcement agencies. Try to contact them so that they know you. Yes.
Do you know of any church incidents in the U.S. that have had more than a single active shooter?
Golly.
I'm sure Colonel Grossman, that's in the back of your
Colonel
Rolodex
Grossman.
right there. Jimmy?
Yeah, the statistics are like 98% of active shooters are a sole perpetrator, and then the 2% that are multiple perpetrators, they're all found in the same location. And so I don't know of any off the top of my head that have been multiple shooters.